What is going on, everybody? It's your boy GS Luke here for our round 4 live stream for the John Deere Classic. Going to cover everything Showdown related and for the PrizePicks board here for Sunday to give you an idea of what I'm expecting and perhaps a few avenues to go out there and take home some profit. So first off, a review of round 3, which from a Showdown side was a slightly below average day. I didn't get the right combination, had plenty of ceiling plays like a Michael Thompson, who we actually talked about here on the stream, but plenty of plays like a Christian Bazainhout, who absolutely went off, Scott Stallings, for example, even Sahith Thagala. He wasn't in my personal player pool, but somebody who I certainly wasn't against playing yesterday. So a few people I saw ended up winning today. I didn't myself. Again, I just didn't get the right combination. I had 58 lineups too, so it's not for a lack of trying, that's for damn sure, but you're not going to hit on every slate. On the PrizePicks side, it was completely up and down. I had cards that hit for 4-4 power plays, and then I had cards that went like 2 for 4 today on powers, which obviously isn't ideal. It was a slightly break-even day on that end, but extremely volatile. We didn't like the board. I made that pretty clear yesterday. A lot of those lines were just ridiculous, right? Like 5.5 birdies. Sahith Thagala, by the way, hit the over on that prop at 5.5, which I found a little bit comical. But a lot of the other unders hit, like on Denny McCarthy, for example, JT Poston, who still had solid rounds, but hit the under on the birdie props. It was just a weird day on the prop board. So we'll talk about that towards the end of the live stream, but we're going to start this off with a look at the weather to begin, and then we'll start it off with our showdown picks. So for the weather, we'll take a look at the scoring average because in terms of scoring, I expect it to look very similar here on Sunday, maybe slightly harder due to the pin locations, which we expect to be a little bit more difficult here for the final round. But it played right around 2.5 strokes under par. I thought it'd play in that -2 to maybe -3 range, and that is pretty much what we got. Almost every hole played under par. The only hole that's kind of being a little bit stubborn at this point is hole number 7. I mean, typically hole 9 plays over par. We expect that, but still playing close to a quarter of a stroke over par. So hole 7, that 226-yard par 3, which I believe was lengthened in the last 2 to 3 years, is certainly showing its teeth. But outside of that, I mean, you're looking at 2/3 of a stroke under par on hole number 2, over half a stroke under par on the last par 5 there. This is a golf course where you're going to see ceiling performances, and today that's what we got, right? So if we sort this by score, Bo Hogue, who I didn't have, absolutely went off. That was certainly not something I saw happening. I don't think many other people did too. He was sub 1% owned, but Scott Stallings we had, Satoshi Kodaira went off today. Emiliano Grillo was in the player pool. We talked him up, of course. Had the solid day there on Friday, also played well yesterday. Cam Davis made a shit ton of birdies, was one of the optimal plays when it came to DFS. Michael Thompson was in our pool against the Hithagala I talked about a little bit. Denny McCarthy, -5, made plenty of birdies, I believe. May have also had a bogey-free round, if memory serves me correctly, which was pretty solid for him. Christian Bazainhout made 7 or 8 birdies. So there's plenty of ceiling performances out there. So when we hop into the DFS slate here, we have to remember that there's going to be plenty of these 6, 7, maybe even 8 under rounds. And even with Sunday pin locations, if somebody's on their best stuff, you're not worrying about trying to get up and down, missing these greens. The ceiling performances are still going to be out there. It's just that there's plenty of over par rounds likely out there tomorrow because of how aggressive you're going to have to be to hit some of these pin locations to access them. You're going to be prone to making mistakes, but those that don't make those mistakes, you're going to see these ceiling performances once again. So though the scoring average might play closer to 2 under par rather than 2.4 that we saw here for Saturday's round, I'd expect to see a similar, maybe even more ceiling performances here for the final round. The weather is a huge thing with that too. So if we take a look at the super forecast, go over here to Sunday, you'll see single digits for much of the morning, which is going to make it even more advantageous than it typically is. Of course, more receptive greens in the morning, also more pristine greens. Makes it maybe like a third of a stroke difference on most slates. With the wind difference, probably an even larger advantage. So we're going to talk about the players here in a second. That is certainly favoring the guys in the morning. But in the afternoon, it's still just single digits, right? The wind gusts are still like 10 to 12 miles an hour. So it's nothing super significant. Nothing these players are going to really have to worry about all that much. So as a result, I'm playing this as, we'll talk about the point situation here with a slight, and I say a slight lean towards the morning wave. There's still going to be plenty of guys towards the top of the leaderboard that are in form, that have been solid with their ball striking over the first 3 rounds that I'm obviously trying to get to. But the real X factor here is, and I'm going to start to bring up the player pool here when we talk about this, is that we really need to target guys that are low owned, that have the upside we're looking for. Because on Sunday Showdown, and this is a specific example of it because there's plenty of counterexamples, I'm willing to go down the board. In fact, I'm fading the guys at the top of the leaderboard. So guys like a Denny McCarthy, JT Poston, I'm going to have 0% of them tomorrow. And while they're more than liable to go out there like they did today, shoot 3 or 4 under par, that's all they have, really all the incentive to do. Maybe Denny McCarthy rate has to be aggressive because he's playing from 3 shots back. But at the same time, he doesn't have to win this golf tournament, right? He'd like to. But at the same time, he's not going to just go out there and just put his life on the line, right? Take aim at every single pin. Whereas you have players like a Maverick McNeely, right, who's full 4 shots back at this point. Maybe that's not the best example, right? Let's go even a little bit further down the leaderboard. Guys like Nick Hartwell, I should say, maybe Bazane Hoot's a better example rather than somebody like McNeely. He's won internationally before, right? He doesn't need to win this golf tournament. And McNeely, he wants to break through for the first time. So he certainly might be a little bit more conservative. Bazane Hoot's going to play like he has nothing to lose tomorrow. So I'm willing to target the guys that are chasing a lot more than the guys up top. A lot of that comes down to ownership too. Christian Bazane Hoot is going to be like 20% owned, which is quite significant, right? When it comes to a slate like this, on Showdown, everyone's a little bit higher owned because you only have like 60, 70 players to choose from. But obviously the guys at the top of the leaderboard, like Bazane Hoot, also get a lot more attention, but it's nothing. And I'm not going to spoil the numbers on Denny McCarthy and somebody like Poston. It is nothing compared to their ownership numbers. They are, upwards of, I'll say, at least 40% when it comes to their projected ownership numbers. And I'm going to be making those pivots all day because, like I said, even if they go out there, let's say JT Poston, for example, right at $9,500, he shoots 4 under par tomorrow. He wins at minus 23. He's probably not in the winning lineup because you're going to have people that are up here in this $10,000 or $9,000 range that shoot 6 to 7 under par tomorrow, that makes 7 or 8 birdies. And JT Poston going out there and shooting 3 to 4 under par might be 5 or 6 birdies. That difference between the, let's say, 2 to 3 birdies that the other player is going to make more than Poston, and that's what I'd be projecting for. I mean, especially in terms of ownership, right? JT Poston is not 2 to 3 times more likely to make the same amount of birdies as the rest of these players. I'd say it's about, let's say, even, right? I mean, he's playing solid golf right now. Maybe it's like a 50-50 shot, right? But that's not the break-even point at this point. He's being treated like he's got like a 75% chance, maybe like a 60% chance of being in the optimal lineup. And that's just not the case with JT Poston. Because like I said, if it's just a 2, maybe 3 birdie difference between these players, that's 15, 16 fantasy points right there. You're getting 12 fantasy points for finishing in first place. For finishing in, let's say, third place, something like that, you're still getting 6.5 placement points. So for Bazane Hoot to go, the difference between him finishing in third and first place is essentially 1 birdie, right? So if you think Bazane Hoot can make 2 more birdies than JT Poston tomorrow, you probably want to make that pivot, right? And I'd say the odds of that happening are at least 50-50. So that's what I was alluding to there, right? And he's going to be half, maybe even a third of the ownership as those 2 other players in almost every single contest. So that's the rundown of why I make these pivots. And I'm not going to give you every play in my player pool. I mentioned that yesterday. It's a part of the new Patreon. If you do want access to my entire player pool, it is on the Patreon page. Same thing with ownership. It's obviously posted on there. That's why I'm making the pivots that I am. That's why I'm making a lot of the low-owned pivots on here. What we're going to talk about with the guys up top in this stream specifically are going to be the guys that maybe aren't so unique, right? The guys that make a little bit more sense, the pieces of chalk that I'm quote-unquote eating tomorrow. Now, if you're looking for the guys that might be those diamonds in the rough per se, those guys that might be single-digit owned, that I'm taking, what you're going to need in these large field GPPs, like I'm saying, one of them's going to go out there and have a ceiling performance, is going to pull us to hit the gala, right? Have a 6 under par round, a bogey-free day, that sort of thing, score over 60 fantasy points. You have to have that to take down the large field GPP. I learned that today, right? I had a solid player pool, but like I said, I slightly lost money because I didn't have to hit the gala. It was one of those type of days. And I kind of called it early on. I was like, right now it's to hit the gala or you don't cash. And we'll have to see if it holds up. I thought it wouldn't hold up, to be honest with you. But here we are, right? At the end of the day, he still had one of the best performances of anyone on the board. So I'm willing to take those type of pivots here on Sunday. And that's what a lot of the guys at the top of the board that you can't see here that I'm playing, those are the type of plays that I'm getting to. So if you're doing your own process, right, figure out who's low owned, right, go I'm sure a lot of you that don't have access to my projections probably do elsewhere, right? Take the low-owned plays that model well at this golf course. That's all I'm going to give you there. I do like Scott Stallings starting out there at -16, so he's in the tie for second place. I loved him going into the week. He's a high upside play, and last Sunday he shot 7 under par to charge up the leaderboard. If he does that once again, he's winning this golf tournament. So, at $9,700, I'm not counting on it, but he's also going to be like 30% owned. So he's certainly going to be chalky, but he's one piece of chalk that I am willing to eat here because the price tag is right. $9,700, I can still play somebody like Maverick with him, or some of the other people I like up here in the 10K range and make lineups and go that way. Christian Bezainhout, we talked about him a little bit. I like his pedigree. I like the fact that he's a winner before on tour. He's been in that situation. I don't think he's going to be nearly as nervous as some of his peers, but more than that, at $9,200, I project him for close to, 57 fantasy points, which is among the guys at the elite of the board, and he's a solid $1,000, maybe even $2,000 cheaper than some of those players. So, in terms of a points per dollar value, he's among the best in the entire field. And for somebody in the 9K range, that's pretty exceptional value right there. So I'll be getting to him in bunches. He will also be relatively chalky up there in terms of ownership. Now that we get a little bit further down the board, I mean, not all of these are going to be pivot plays, but there's a lot more of them here. So first off, we have CT Pan starting at 11 under par. And given his position on the board, which is as of right now in the top 20, you'd expect him to be higher owned than I have him at. So for CT Pan, he had the hot putter from outer space today, was absolutely scorching hot. I love getting to him at $8,600. I think he's worth the investment. Somebody I project for nearly 54 fantasy points. And like I said, that's creeping up close to some of the guys up here, like even like the Charles III. I project him for more points than Sahith Theegala, for example, right? So trying to pivot to some of these players, for example, like a CT Pan, who I think is just going a little bit criminally underowned, makes a lot of sense. And there's quite a few other plays in this range that fit that same type of description. I'll be fading Matthias Schwab. He really looked, I'd say, sketchy at best for his last 9 holes out there. Wasn't hitting many greens. His around green play wasn't all that solid. And though he had a few beautiful shots on the day, one of them was a near albatross, a few iron shots to like 3 to 4 feet. You can't rely on that round in, round out, right? You're not always going to hit those amazing 10 out of 10 golf shots every single hole, that sort of thing. So I absolutely, I don't like the play enough. He's super chalk. I'm not going to give you the ownership number on him, but the ownership is way higher than it should be on Schwabi sweatpants, as some would call them. We've got David Lipsky there at $8,100. He's going to be relatively low owned. So it's obviously at 10 under par. He's not at the top of the leaderboard, right? He's 6 shots back. But if he goes out there, shoots 6 to 7 under par, which we saw multiple times today, I mean, he's probably finishing in the top 5, right? At the very least, maybe even the top 3 of this golf tournament. Now, maybe top 3 is pushing it. Maybe top 5 is a little bit more obtainable if he gets to 16, 17 under par. But at $8,100, I loved the modeling. I liked the fit, like just for this golf course in general going into the week. So somebody I'll be going back to after a mediocre performance today, just shot 3 under par, which, didn't kill him, as a little bit better than the average today, but I'm certainly going to be low owned because it's perceived to be a quote unquote bad performance. But like I said, it still was slightly above average, right? We just need him to have that ceiling performance. We have Hank Lebioda at $7,700. I like his putting upside, a streaky putter who has certainly had it over the first 3 rounds of this golf tournament. So I'll be getting to hammering Hank. The price makes sense at $7,700. You don't get a ton of salary flexibility, but he fits in nicely in that mid-tier range, right? When you're trying to round out a lineup, taking your 4th or your 5th player, Hank Lebioda is just a logical fit in a lot of those lineups, particularly since I'm not being super aggressive in the 10K range. I have Maverick Neely on here, but a lot of my plays are here in the 9K range and then up here in the 8K range too. Just more of a balanced approach for me here. I'm looking for high quality players that are low owned. And in terms of the 8 and 9K range, there's plenty of guys that maybe haven't had the best start to their golf tournament, right? They're in the single digits under par, that sort of thing, that have more than enough ability to go low, right? And I'll give a hint on one, right? Like Patrick Rogers, for example, is somebody who fits that description in bunches, right? He can go out there tomorrow, shoot 6 to 7 under par. It wouldn't surprise anybody because he's a streaky mofo. And when it comes to these round 4 showdowns where all of the ownership, because of those placement points, is going to funnel between guys like Denny McCarthy and JT Poston. Those are the type of pivots that I'm looking to make in bunches. So with that, we'll go ahead and catch up on chat, see what's going on down there. We got Robert says, "What's good, Luke? What's up with the PP lines makers?" Yeah, with MLB today, they made a mistake, so it was a little bit strange out there. On golf, I mean, yesterday a few of our lines changed, which, it's going to happen, right? When there's action coming in on lines, there's nothing we can do about it. It's kind of automated in some of their systems. But yeah, today we're going to go over a few lines, and hopefully you can catch them before they change. Hopefully it doesn't happen too quickly there. Yeah, Frankie says he's back. That's great to see. And Frank, I will check your message on Twitter a little bit later. And you said you faded a ton today. You'll fade a ton tomorrow too on PrizePicks. That's going to be the strategy for me too. At least a lot of my early leans when I was looking at the slate before we went live here were for fades. One of them was Matthias Schwab under birdies. He was at like 5.5. And then there was Brendan Todd at 11.5 fairways, which he's hit 12 all 3 days to this point. But that's an 86% clip. Just it's hard to sustain. I mean, it's like there's 14 fairways. He only has to miss 3 to hit the under there. Yeah, we'll talk about it. There's certainly some fades I like getting to because the lines are astronomical at this point. I mean, they've picked players that are at the top of the leaderboard that are in form, that have hit, just had flawless records to this point. But there's plenty of counterexamples out there. Like the guys at the middle point, like Patrick Rogers, for example, he's been all over the place. So there's certainly ability to miss greens and miss fairways around this golf course. I think it's just that the guys at the top of the leaderboard are playing exceptional golf. He said, yeah, that one's crazy with the 11.5 fairways. Like, that seems like a mistake. There's 14 fairways. And again, he's hit 12 the first 3 days. That is why the line is 11.5. But it's hard to project somebody for 11.5 fairways. I have to take the under there. That's just, it's not ridiculous. It's not blasphemous, but from an ROI or a just average hit percentage standpoint, it's well towards the under. It's like a 65% hit rate for the under, that sort of thing. Even as an elite driver of the golf ball, he hits right around like 79, like 79.7, I believe the last time I looked at it in terms of fairway percentage. Which is right around 11 fairways, which is on the under, right? So obviously it's like a half a fairway difference right there. That's enough to bet. That's enough to go out there and take action on some of these things. Let's get back into the board. We talked about Lipsky. We talked about Lebiota a bit. We'll catch up on here in the middle of the 7K range. Talk about a few of the guys down low that I'm getting to. I guess the fades. And fades here in the 7K range are almost as important to talk about as the guys that I'm playing. So I did highlight quite a few of the important fades here. So Callum Turan, he looked like a nervous Nelly in his interview. I cannot lie. It's definitely factored into the decision here. He looked like he had a hard time answering questions, to be honest with you. His play at the US Open after he got the lead completely tanked. And he even alluded to that during his interview after the round. And anytime you have these lower tier players, and again, it's not me talking shit about Callum Turan. He's an up-and-coming prospect, right? But he's $7,600. That's a significant price tag, and his ownership is through the roof. I'm going to fade that all day. I'd rather take the chasers because even if he shoots 4 under par tomorrow, right, and that's a top 5 finish, he only makes like 5 birdies, that's not going to crack the optimal lineup. That's great for cash lineups. And again, I'm not projecting him to shoot 4 under par, right? It'd be closer to like maybe 2 under par is what I'd project somebody like Callum Turan. There's no doubt that he might be okay in smaller field GPPs. But in large field stuff where you're looking to take down $50,000, $100,000, you guys know the type of GPPs I'm talking about. You don't want to play these type of players. They're just lower tier players, lower pedigree players in the long-term perspective. So other guys that fit that same description would be Michael Gliggett, however you say his name there. It's a weird one to say. They're at $7,100. Kelly Craft fits that same type of description. Towards the bottom of the board, you have Curtis Thompson with his momentum going into the week. I think he's going to be a little bit too highly owned for me. And then, of course, Bo Hoag, right? $6,100. He shot, what was it, like 8, 9 under par today. He's minus 14 to start. He's going to be like 20% owned for this slate. So for me, all of those guys are just going to be automatic fades because there's plenty of pivots around them that are going to be maybe sub 2% owned, particularly with the guys down low, right? So like Bo Hoag, for example, he's going to be like 20% owned at $6,100. You can play almost the entire range down here instead of Bo Hoag just by making that pivot. I mean, you're looking at like single digits on every single player down here, if not sub 2% ownership on most of them. Guys like a Patrick Flavin, who we'll talk about right now, I absolutely love at $6,400. He's at -9. I'm not worried about the placement points for him. If he just replicates what he did today, which was solid, shoot well under par, maybe get to 6 to 7 under par instead. Could be looking at a ceiling performance from him. He's a great putter, a lot better on shorter golf courses. He's been quoted as saying that to this point, and he's extremely affordable. He opens up plenty of salary, and it's not like you need it. Like I said, I'm taking more of a balanced approach to begin with, but perhaps if I'm trying to jam in a few guys up top that I like, or a few guys in the 8K range rather than the 7K range that I really like, Patrick Flavin gives me that ability to do so. So I like him there at that price tag. James Hahn I'll be taking. He's the first one off today. He'll be playing by himself, and usually that either goes really well for a player or it goes sideways extremely fast. So at $6,700, he's a flyer at the very most, but he's also going to be sub 2% owned. I forget the exact number I have not there. Obviously, check it on the spreadsheet if you have access. But yeah, I'm looking to get some leverage there, maybe in like 7 to 12% of my lineups, something in that range. We talked about the fades there, and Chesson Hadley. Sorry. Yeah, he is in the player poll. I guess I shouldn't have spoiled that, but I had Zach Johnson down as the yes here, was off by one. Both of them are in the player poll. Zach Johnson, I like the fact that he's this hometown guy. He's on the board of directors for this golf tournament, plays the golf course damn near every month at this point because he lives relatively nearby. So I'll be taking him at $7,600. Again, we're looking for a ceiling performance. I really don't care about their placement points tomorrow, particularly because placement points, at least at the start of the round, first off, they're relevant, right? You can have the guy shoot 1 over par, even like 1 or 2 under par, and lose a majority of those points. But even more than that, you can make up for it with birdie production. At a birdie fest like that, I expect there to be at least 4 or 5 guys that shoot 7 under par tomorrow. And you're going to have those guys in the GPP to win. So Zach Johnson, a prime candidate to do so with his putting ability. So that's all the player poll that I'm going to go at least through with you guys. We'll talk about some of the strategy, though. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'll bring up Draftkings. We'll talk through maybe not a whole lineup together, but we'll talk through maybe how I'd start a few of my lineups when it comes to the lineup building phase. So this is going to be for the large field GPP. We're just going to focus on that. That's what a majority of you out there are playing. But it's translatable to pretty much any contest, even for like 3 maxes, single entries, particularly the larger contests when it comes to those single entries. You want to be thinking the same type of way here. And like I said, I'm fading Dan McCarthy. I'm not playing JT Poston. That's going to carry over for every single contest outside of cash. And cash, you play JT Poston, okay? Let me get that straight with you guys right now. I'm not a cash player, though. I don't play cash very often. I'll do it from time to time just for fun, that sort of thing, but not my sort of thing. But if you're going that direction, definitely take JT Poston. For the sake of this lineup, just to talk through it here, let's take Maverick McNeely, who I think is going to be relatively low owned. Not only is he more expensive than he should be, he's still, starting in 10th place. He's only a few shots off the top 3 at this point, to be quite honest with you. And he's got plenty of upside. Could very easily shoot 7 or 8 under par. Is long off the tee, has more than enough upside with the irons, has that magic putter, right? We've seen that for the last year and a half on the PGA Tour, and certainly here at the John Deere Classic around TPC Deere Run. He's made plenty of putts. So let's put a high upside play like McNeely in there. We still have $8,000 remaining. So let's take another guy in the 9K range. Let's put Bazane in there. I know we talked him up a little bit before. These 2 guys aren't going to be mega chalk, right? They're not going to be super highly owned. Sorry, I got to keep holding back saying the percentages for these guys. Super highly owned, like a McCarthy and JT Poston there. So I'm not that worried about chalk yet, especially if we maybe make a pivot here with this pick. So let's take CT Pan. He's going to be relatively low owned. Towards the 7K range, Hank Lebiota, right? He's not going to be super chalky there. Let's move down further. $7,400. It's probably a good spot to stop. I already told you we're playing Chesson Hadley, so I don't feel that bad about it. So at this point in a large field GPP, because we're fading the 2 guys up top, I'm not that worried about leaving salary on the table. Now, maybe leave $100, $200 on the table, but this lineup, even if you took Lauer there at $6,900, probably going to be a unique lineup. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and take James Hahn for the sake of this video, leave the $200 on the table. But if you wanted to spend up at any one of the other positions, be my guest, right? You could more than do so. You could go from a Christian Bazane If you really wanted Cam Davis, go in that direction. Obviously, a great birdie maker in his own right. But for me, I'm not focusing at the top of the leaderboard, right? I'm not sorting this by score like some people might do. This is a lot more important at golf courses that are difficult, like at the US Open, for example, the PGA Championship, where we're expecting a scoring average probably over par. When we're going to see a bunch of those 7, 8 under pars again, I hate to harp on this, but it's by far the most important thing to consider here for Sunday Showdown is you don't have to worry about the guys at the top of the board. I mean, literally, mega chalk. I'm still playing Stallings, but mega chalk. Rio going to be mega chalk. Turan mega chalk. Nagel. He might not be super chalky just because he is a Monday qualifier, but like at least 10% owned, right? Bo Hogue, Christian Bezan, all these guys are going to be extremely high owned. If you're going to take any of them, you better have a damn good reason for doing so and only play, let's say, of the guys here on the page that you can see right now, you should be playing at most 3, maybe 4 of them in your player pool. That's it. The rest of them all need to be fades. You cannot play all the guys that are going to be 20% plus owned on a slate. So that would be my advice to you guys out there when you're making lineups, doing that sort of thing. So that's all we've got here for the Showdown side. We'll catch up on chat, see if there's any questions. Then we're going to talk about PrizePicks. So buckle on in. We'll get to that here in just a minute. We have Mark, who says, just watching a bit of the Live Tour and Grace was just teeing off and the crowd was shouting, "Let's go, Brandon." Oh my gosh, dude. I think I saw that the other day too. They were doing that on the PGA Tour. One of them said F Greg Norman or something like that on the live broadcast. And you could hear the broadcasters like chuckling to themselves. So people are going to be immature, no event they're at. I mean, say things that are a little bit obscene. I mean, obviously, I think, again, the whole thing is actually a little bit obscene. I get a little bit tired of hearing that sort of thing. So, yeah, not my thing there. JG Funk says, so close to being in the money for Showdown round 2 and 3, but no. Yeah, I'm assuming you're somebody who does like single entries, that sort of thing. It could be a little bit tilting when you're not entering 150 lineups. And NSN says, let's effing go. JT is playing incredible. Do you think he can win? So, obviously, JT Poston is NSN's guy over here. I think he can win. He's obviously in a great position to. I don't love him for fantasy purposes, but from a win percentage, I believe Data Golf has him at like a 40-50% chance of winning, something like that, maybe even higher at this point. That was a little bit earlier on today. He is in a great position. He's playing solid golf. If he shoots 4 under par tomorrow, it would be really difficult for him not to win this event. So I tend to agree with that. JD Funk says, at least I loaded up on Lipsky on Jock Market. By the way, Jock Market, guys, a great market to get on. I used to do videos on it, which I enjoyed doing quite a bit. I just haven't had a lot of time. I've been doing a lot of PrizePicks stuff instead and whatnot. But Jock Market, if you haven't gone over there yet, definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun. It's essentially like a stock market when it comes to golfers. You can buy and sell shares of players. And kind of like JG was saying, Lipsky, the guys that are like the 7K golfers go for way too cheap. They go for like $3, maybe $4 at a most per share there on Jock Market. And Lipsky, he's not even doing that great at right now, right? He's like minus 10, minus 12 right now. And I'm sure your ROI is just like through the roof, right? Because you don't need a guy to win or even finish in the top 5 to get a ton of ROI in that type of market. So I agree with you there, JG. Good call there on the Lipsky shares. It's a great market too. It's a lot of fun. You can buy and sell them live too. So it's not like you have to like hold on to your shares. You can unload them and move on to other markets if you'd like to. Let's hop over here into the PrizePicks board, and we're just going to go category by category. Not every single one is really to my liking here, so we'll talk about that, obviously. My favorite boards are going to be birdie or better matchups. Birdie or better, there's actually a few that I like, particularly for the under. Green regulation, I absolutely hate here for Sunday. And fairways hit, there's only 1 or 2 props that I really like. So we're really going to focus here on birdie or better, matchup, birdie or better, and then some strokes too. There's a few other stroke props that I like, particularly trying to fade some of the players towards the top of the leaderboard, which is a scary prospect. But more often than not, the nerves and the jitters do get to players and can cause players some problems. Alrighty, let's get this thing rolling. So like I said, we're going to start with the matchups. And there's quite a few I like here. So first off, the first one here, Sahith Theegala versus Whaley. I absolutely love it. While Whaley is a volatile player, Sahith Theegala is a much higher pedigree player than somebody like Vince Whaley. So I'd be taking the over on that. It's one of my favorite birdie or better matchups. This Bezainhout versus Svensson, while I think it's a close matchup, it would be a lean towards Zane Hoot. Now, I'm not going to add it to my card. It's not going to be one of my official picks and whatnot, but definitely a lean towards Seabez there. He's a much higher quality player. This McNeely versus Pan is a pass for me. I think that's a really close matchup. Howell versus Lipsky, it's another close matchup, but believe it or not, it's the under there for Lipsky I'm on. I think Lipsky has a lot more upside. He's a much more consistent putter than Charles Howell III. And the ball striking has been there for Lipsky throughout the week. He's been extremely accurate off the tee and hitting plenty of greens too. Just hasn't been sticking it all that close. So I like Lipsky there. I'd be going towards that side of that matchup. Charles Howell III playing some solid golf of himself, but like I said, I trust the putter for Lipsky a little bit more than CH3. Could struggle there from time to time. JT Poston versus Stallings. Now that's close. I would side towards Stallings. I would make that an official pick, but JT Poston is striping the golf ball. It's really hard to bet against him in a 50-50 format. That's why I said in cash, you absolutely have to play JT Poston, right? From like the 50th percentile type of performance, you have to project him better than everyone else in the field. I mean, he's playing unconscious right now, hitting, I believe, 17 greens today. He hit like 16 the day before, 14 there in day one. It's not just the putter that is spiking for JT Poston. He's playing solid golf right now, right? But in a fantasy perspective, right, we're looking for a true ceiling. But in a matchup perspective, I would be taking JT Poston. But that's close. I really like Stallings there too. That's going to be a fade for my personal portfolio. Like I said, I would shade towards JT. You have a McCarthy versus Kazire. That would be the Denny McCarthy side. I worry about his incentive out there. He's not going to be nearly as aggressive as somebody like Kazire, who's a little bit further down the leaderboard. I believe he's at 11 under par, something in that range for Patton. So definitely needs to shoot like 7 under par to actually go out there and crack the top 5. But Denny McCarthy, one of the best putters on tour, he is still 3 shots off the lead. A little bit less worried about motivation than somebody like JT Poston, right? Like Poston might ease up on the gas a little bit if he's 4 under par on the back 9 and has a 2-shot lead. Denny McCarthy is not going to be in that situation. That's impossible for him to be in, right? He's going to have to keep his foot on the gas for the entire round. So I'd be taking the over on Denny there. Emiliano Grillo versus Turan. That'd be Grillo all day. Like I said, Turan's in contention for one of the first times, so I expect him to be nervous there. Zach Johnson versus Long. I'd be taking Zach Johnson there, but it's just a lean. Don't absolutely love it. Todd versus Wu. It's another lean versus Brendan Todd. Schwab versus Malnati. That's a fade. I think that's a really good matchup. Malnati's an absolute madman. Makes birdies in bunches. And this Fratelli versus Patrick Rogers, it would certainly be the Patrick Rogers side, but I don't know if it's enough to actually add to my cards. It's more of a lean than anything there on the under. But if you're looking to make a bunch of birdie or better matchup cards, right, maybe go with some of the leans that I gave you. I'll bet like 2 or 3 of the matchups on the board there. I do like in at least like a 55 to maybe 60 percentile type of hit rate. But the ones that I put over here on the right there a second ago, those were at least 60% hit rates. Ones that I would say are a little bit more than a lean. Ones that I'll personally be investing in for the next round. Let's see what we got here. We have Frankie says, I do not trust anyone to hit 6 birdies tomorrow. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I certainly agree with you there. So we'll talk about that prop next, but let's talk about strokes before we get there, which is very straightforward, right? Obviously, it's a par 71. So based on whether they're going to shoot 4 under par or better is the line here for 67.5. And 4 under par on a Sunday, I'd be worried about it at most golf courses. But here at TPC John Deere, I think the unders on quite a few of these players make sense. So particularly the guys that are a little bit further back, like Sahithagala, I don't really hate it at all there for him at 67.5. But the guys at 68 that can push with the -3, I especially like. So like a Zach Johnson, I mentioned him playing this golf course a million times. He's had success here almost every start he's came to TPC Deere Run. I love the under on him at 68 strokes. One of my favorite props on the board. Even somebody like Brendan Todd, who maybe hasn't had the best week to this point, he's a perfect fit for the golf course. Accurate off the tee, has the putter we're looking for. I really think they're safe because we have that push in our back pocket at -3. And you can see the birdie lines down here, like 5 birdies, right? 5 birdies. What is it? Zach Johnson's also at 5 birdies right there. I'm a little bit more confident in them shooting -3 tomorrow. I should say -4 in hitting than I am in them making 6 birdies, because these are 2 players that are incredibly accurate off the tee. They don't make many bogeys to begin with. They're also really good short game players. So when they get out of position, they tend to save it a lot more than most. That's why I'm trying to take the strokes board here. At certain golf courses, I definitely like getting to the birdie or better board more than the strokes board. But this is one where I'm trying to play the under on the strokes, especially for players that were further down towards the bottom. That are here at like 68 strokes. And then here for birdie or better, kind of like Frank was saying before, there's some guys at the top of the board that I'd be fading. So first and foremost, JT posted at 5.5. He didn't hit the over today, and I'd be taking the under once again. He had nerves on his back nine. That was especially evident with some of his off the tee play, and I'd expect that to be even more so the case here for Sunday's round. So I'd be taking the under at 5.5 there. Let's see. We talked about Matthias Schwab, or at least I mentioned it towards the beginning of the live stream here. I'll be taking the under at 5.5 birdies. Another player who's not really used to being in contention internationally, has been a little bit more of a acclaimed player, has a little bit more of a track record to him, but on the PGA Tour has not been in contention. So, or at least not very often. And particularly in the national stage like he is this week. So I'll be taking the under at 5.5 birdies. Again, harder pin locations are going to make birdies a little bit harder to come by here. Let's see. For the overs, I mean, Zach Johnson at 5, I'd lean towards the over. But like I said, I like the strokes props a little bit more. Brendan Todd at 5, yeah, I'd just rather take the strokes props. That's for sure there. Howell, I'm probably not touching at 5.5. I mean, if he was at 5, I'd consider taking the over there. Same thing with somebody like Bazane Hoot or Griot. They're that hook there at 5.5, kind of like Frank was saying, it's really hard to just project somebody for over 6 birdies. I project them for right around 5.5 birdies, to be quite frank with you, right about the projections that they have them at. So kind of have to pick and choose your spots when it comes to the PrizePicks board. Once again, pretty tight lines here for Saturday and Sunday, which we've come to expect at this point. Obviously, they have a lot more data to work off of, as of do we. We're going to have a little bit more luck, so are they. So it's going to be a little bit slimmer pickings. Here for GIR, they got bumped up even more. I thought 14 was ridiculously high yesterday, and now we have guys at 14.5. So naturally, I'd be trying to fade players here. The issue is trying to find them because, like I said, JT Poston hit 17 greens today. I'd much rather fade him when it came to birdie or better than I would be for greens and regulation. I mean, he's just been absolutely hitting piss missiles. But, like I said, I'd be favoring the under on that prop. Seth Thegal, I'm probably not taking in either direction. Same thing with Emiliano Grillo. Both of them are really solid iron players. Bazane Hoot, though I'd like him for tomorrow, he's not always the most consistent iron player. So maybe I would lean towards taking the under there, but not something I really want to commit to from this standpoint. Even Denny McCarthy, right? He's a little bit sketchy at times with that iron play. He's not the most consistent player, and given his position on the leaderboard, maybe that's something you want to take a look at. But kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, greens and regulation, I kind of hate here, right? So there's not really any that I'm going to make an official pick here for the slate, but just know that it'd be a lot of unders, if anything. The guys I consider taking overs on here, and there are a few of them. So first and foremost, Matthias Schwab at 14, though he can deal with putting issues, he is a reliable iron player. So if there was any prop I was going to take the over on for Schwab and not fade him for Sunday, would be the over there at 14 greens. Brendan Todd at 14, I don't hate. He's great at hitting greens. He just isn't always the most aggressive player, which maybe we like for greens, especially for Sunday pin locations, right? We don't really want somebody who's taking aim at every pin, putting themselves in compromising positions every single time. And other than that, McNeely at 14, I would lean towards the over, but like I said, GIR is far from my favorite prop line for the slate. And finally, we've got greens and regulation, which this is just a smash. 11.5 fairways for anybody is ridiculous. I don't care if they're the most accurate driver in the world, like Brendan Todd is, right? We got to give him credit where credit's due. He's hit 12 fairways in all 3 rounds to this point. But what are the odds that happens again? I mean, just per my modeling, I have him hitting 11 fairways at over 65% of the rate. So it's 11 or under 65% of the time. So the fact that he's done that 3 times in a row, the actual odds of that are close to 4 or 5%, something in that range. I'm not going to do the math out there on a calculator, but obviously take a 35% hit rate, put it to the third power, and that's your odds of that happening right there. So Brendan Todd, not somebody I have a whole lot of faith in getting to, especially for the over. So I'm taking the under. I mean, guys, we got a Rory McIlroy fairway line at 11, right? And it was considered a free square. And granted, Rory McIlroy, a completely different player than Brendan Todd, right? Brendan Todd, a lot more accurate off the tee. But these fairways are not that much wider than the golf course we had them at 11 at, and people were smashing. I mean, putting a ton of money on the under there. You can see he's a whole fairway and a half higher than anyone else, or say a fairway. Got Zach Johnson up here at 10 and a half. Even that's high. Even I considered taking the under 10 and a half on Zach Johnson, let alone Brendan Todd up here at 11 and a half. So there's going to be a fairway prop that I'm taking here for the fourth round. It would be the under on Brendan Todd, that's for sure. In terms of overs, honestly, Poston at 9, I expect him to be very conservative. You know, winning would mean a lot to JT Poston. You know, he hasn't been playing his best golf for the last year. Even diehard Poston fans like myself would be lying to ourselves if we would say otherwise. I think he's going to be very conservative. I think you're going to see a lot more irons from him off the tee than you are drivers. He got himself into a few problem spots today off the tee. And while there weren't hazards there, he wasn't taking penalty drops or something like that. If it happens at the wrong time, he could have been, right? And I think that's going to creep into his mind, that driving accuracy issue. I think he's going to go out there and make it a concerted effort to get it in the short grass tomorrow, particularly because he's playing from out front, right? He's playing a completely different ball game than everyone else. So I take the over on JT Poston. Again, there's a reason all these guys are at like 10, right? There's guys hitting 11, 12 fairways per round out there out of 14. So I don't think that's too far-fetched. And Sahith Theegala at 8.5 fairways, smash the over on it. And I know he's inaccurate too, but again, there's a lot of players out there hitting 9, 10, 11, 12 fairways per round. Even the most inaccurate drivers like a Sahith Theegala. I mean, Ricky Fowler, if he was in this field, he'd probably be at like 8 fairways. I'd be taking the over on him as well in that type of circumstance. So that's what I've got for PrizePicks. I'll go ahead and catch up on chat before we wrap this thing up. So let's see what we've got there. We have Frank who says the pressure will be on the last round, so 5 is your cutoff. Yeah, exactly. Especially for the guys at the top of the board, right? So you have to consider where they are in terms of their skill set, their motivation factor. For Sahith Theegala at 5.5, right? I'd be much more willing to take the over on him at 5.5 than somebody like JT Poston, for example, right? He has nowhere near as much incentive to go out there and make 6 birdies. Now, if he makes 6 birdies, I'm sure he'd be thrilled about it, but he's not going to be taking aim at every single pin like Sahith would be, right? So definitely agree with you there, Frank, especially when you take it on a case-by-case basis. So that's all I've got here for the Round 4 live stream. If you're watching this on replay and you do have any questions, do not be shy at all to go ahead and throw them down in chat. We will be doing similar live streams for next week's golf tournament. We are going to be focusing mainly on the Scottish Open and then doing some side content for the Barbasol. So we'll have both golf tournaments covered, kind of like what we did for the PGA this week and the Live Golf Tournament, but going to be like a 90% focus on the Scottish, like 10% focus over there on the Barbasol. Obviously, with the alternate field, not many strong top-end players out there. Not going to make that something that I'm really hunkering down on. So that's what we're going with for next week. Hopefully everybody has a solid Sunday. Obviously, 4th of July weekend. Hopefully everybody's spending time with family, able to have a solid time out there. I'll be doing the same thing. So enjoying ourselves. Hopefully everybody has a great holiday. So best of luck. Like I said, I'll see you guys next time.